There is a moment almost every man experiences, and it never feels logical. You finally stop chasing. You give her space. You pull your energy back just enough to regain your balance. And instead of things becoming clearer, she suddenly feels colder, more distant, almost as if you did something wrong. The silence grows, the tone shifts, and your mind starts racing. Is she losing interest, or is something else happening beneath the surface? This moment creates confusion because men are taught to read distance as rejection. We are conditioned to believe that if a woman cares, she moves closer, becomes warmer, and offers reassurance. So when the opposite happens, the instinct is to fix it, explain, or chase the connection back into place. But that instinct is often the very thing that breaks what was quietly forming. What most men don't realize is that emotional distance does not always mean emotional loss. Sometimes it means emotional weight. Sometimes it means her feelings are growing faster than her sense of control. And sometimes the silence you're experiencing is not a sign of disinterest, but a moment of internal conflict on her side. This is where most men make their first critical mistake. They react before they understand. And without understanding the psychology behind this moment, they unknowingly turn confusion into collapse and potential connection into regret. The biggest misunderstanding men have about love is believing it should always be consistent, predictable, and emotionally smooth. Men are wired to think in straight lines. Interest grows, connection deepens, closeness increases. So when emotions are real, men expect warmth to remain steady and visible. But that's not how emotional attraction works for women. Women don't experience love as a straight path. They experience it in waves. One moment they feel close, open, and deeply connected. The next moment they feel overwhelmed, cautious, or emotionally exposed. This fluctuation isn't manipulation, confusion, or immaturity. It's a natural response to emotional intensity. When feelings start to matter, emotional risk enters the picture, and with risk comes self-protection. The stronger the emotion, the stronger the instinct to slow things down internally. That's why a woman can feel deeply drawn to a man and still create distance at the same time. Her heart may be moving forward, while her mind is pulling the brakes. Men often misinterpret this emotional wave as instability or loss of interest. In reality, it's often a sign that something meaningful is developing. The mistake is assuming love must look calm and consistent at every stage. True emotional connection often feels uncertain before it feels secure. And the men who don't understand this mistake normal emotional shifts for rejection, then react in ways that weaken attraction instead of strengthening it. When a woman begins to fall in love, something shifts internally that most men never see. It isn't excitement alone, it's awareness. The moment she realizes that you matter to her, you activate her emotional defense system. Not because you did something wrong, but because you did something right. Strong feelings create vulnerability. Vulnerability creates risk, and risk triggers protection. When she feels herself losing emotional control, her instinct is not always to move closer. Often, it's to step back and regain balance. Pulling away becomes a way to breathe, to think, and to stabilize her emotions before they move too fast. This is where men get confused. They assume distance equals declining interest, but in many cases, the distance appears precisely because the feelings are increasing. She isn't pulling away from you. She's pulling herself back from the intensity of what she feels around you. Another important truth is that emotional attachment challenges a woman's sense of independence and self-identity. Falling for someone means opening herself to influence, expectation, and potential loss. Even if she wants closeness, part of her resists surrendering emotional control too quickly. So she creates space, not as punishment, but as protection. If a man doesn't understand this phase, he reacts with urgency. He tries to secure reassurance. He seeks clarity. He pushes for emotional confirmation. But this pressure reinforces the very fear she's trying to manage. The irony is that the more calmly a man handles this moment, the safer she feels moving closer again. When a woman pulls away, there are usually two forces working beneath the surface: fear and instinct. Understanding the difference between them changes how you respond and whether the connection survives. The first is fear, fear of getting hurt, fear of losing emotional balance, fear of investing in something that could eventually cost her peace. Past experiences, disappointments, and emotional wounds don't disappear just because she meets someone new. When her feelings deepen, those memories surface. Distance becomes a way to slow the emotional momentum and protect herself from potential pain. The second force is instinct. This isn't calculated or manipulative. It's subconscious. Women are biologically and emotionally wired to assess stability in the men they attach to. When emotions intensify, her instinct quietly asks, is this man emotionally solid? Can I trust his center? Does his confidence remain steady when mine fluctuates? So she creates space and watches, not to punish, but to observe. She pays attention to how you handle uncertainty. Do you panic? Do you chase? Do you lose your composure? Or do you remain grounded, calm, and secure in yourself? Fear is about self-protection. Instinct is about evaluation. Both can exist at the same time, and neither automatically means she's losing interest. The mistake most men make is responding emotionally instead of intelligently. When you react with pressure, fear grows. When you remain steady, instinct relaxes. And when her instinct relaxes, emotional safety begins to form. When a woman becomes quieter, most men assume communication is breaking down. In reality, something else is happening. She isn't listening to your words anymore. She's watching your behavior. Silence becomes a test, not of how much you care, but of how stable you are without reassurance. This test is rarely intentional. She doesn't sit there planning it. It unfolds naturally as she steps back and observes how you respond to the absence of feedback. Your reaction gives her information she can't get through conversation alone. Words can be controlled. Reactions cannot. She notices if your mood shifts immediately. She notices if your tone changes, if you become anxious, impatient, or emotionally reactive. She notices whether your confidence depends on her responses or whether it exists independently. The silence creates contrast, and contrast reveals truth. Most men fail this test because they don't know it exists. They fill the space with explanations, emotional messages, or repeated attempts to reconnect. They think they're fixing the situation, but they're actually answering the question she never asked out loud. What she's really learning is simple. Can this man remain himself when I'm not present emotionally? Can he hold his center without external validation? A man who can remain calm in silence communicates strength without speaking, and that silent strength is far more reassuring than any words he could send. The biggest mistake most men make in this moment is failing to remain grounded. The moment she creates distance, they abandon their center. Instead of staying calm, they react. Instead of observing, they pursue. And instead of remaining stable, they try to regain control through words, attention, or emotional pressure. They send long messages explaining how they feel. They ask for clarity she didn't request. They overcommunicate in an attempt to fix discomfort. What they don't realize is that none of this demonstrates strength. It demonstrates dependence. And emotional dependence is the fastest way to weaken attraction. A man who cannot remain steady during distance unconsciously communicates that his confidence is fragile, that his emotional balance depends on her behavior, that without her reassurance, he begins to unravel. This confirms the very fear she is trying to resolve internally, whether closeness with him would feel safe or overwhelming. Remaining calm is not indifference. Remaining silent is not punishment. Remaining grounded is power. When a man can remain emotionally consistent even when attention is withdrawn, he shows that his value is not situational. He doesn't need to convince, explain, or chase. The irony is simple. The moment a man stops trying to fix the distance and instead remains centered within it, the tension begins to dissolve on its own. Because stability is what she was looking for all along. When a woman pulls away, most men assume she needs reassurance, explanations, or emotional effort. In reality, what she needs is much simpler and much harder for most men to give. She needs stability, not verbal stability, emotional stability. She needs to feel that your sense of self doesn't rise and fall with her attention, that your confidence doesn't disappear the moment she becomes quiet, that your life, your direction, and your inner calm remain intact, whether she is close or distant. She doesn't need constant messages checking in. She doesn't need repeated affirmations of interest, and she doesn't need emotional pressure disguised as concern. What she responds to is energy, not words, presence, not pursuit, calm, not intensity. Giving her space while staying emotionally available is a sign of maturity. It shows that you respect her internal process without withdrawing in resentment or chasing in insecurity. This balance is rare, and it's exactly why it stands out. When a man can allow distance without panic, he becomes safe, not boring, not passive. Safe in the deepest psychological sense. Safety allows her nervous system to relax, and when that happens, closeness becomes something she chooses, not something she feels pressured into. One of the most important distinctions a man can learn is the difference between a woman who is pulling away and a woman who is leaving. Confusing the two leads to overreaction, anxiety, and unnecessary loss. When a woman is leaving, the shift is clear. Communication becomes flat, detached, and final. There is no curiosity, no emotional tension, no observation. She doesn't watch your reactions because she no longer cares about the outcome. The connection fades cleanly. Pulling away looks different. There is distance, but there is still awareness. She may become quieter, slower to respond, or emotionally reserved, yet she continues to notice you. She watches how you move, how you react, and whether your energy changes. The silence feels charged, not empty. Men often panic because both situations involve less attention, but only one involves emotional investment. Learning to recognize this difference allows you to respond with intelligence instead of fear. And intelligence in moments of uncertainty is far more attractive than urgency. Passing this moment doesn't require strategy, manipulation, or emotional performance. It requires self-control. The test isn't about doing more. It's about not doing what insecurity demands. To pass, you remain grounded. You continue your life with intention. You focus on your work, your health, your goals, and your routines. Not to prove anything, but because your life already has direction. You don't withdraw in bitterness, and you don't chase in fear. You simply stay steady. Emotionally, you regulate yourself. You notice the urge to reach out for reassurance and choose composure instead. You allow space without attaching meaning to it. This signals that your inner state is not dependent on her availability. Energetically, this creates contrast. She feels the absence of pressure. She senses that you are unchanged, and that calm consistency answers her unspoken question more clearly than words ever could. The key is patience. Silence does not require a response unless one is genuinely needed. Time reveals intention, and when she feels that your presence is solid, even in her absence, trust begins to replace doubt. You pass the test not by effort but by stability. Attraction operates on a paradox most men struggle to accept. The harder you chase, the more pressure you create, and pressure suffocates desire. When a woman senses that a man needs her attention to feel secure, attraction slowly erodes. Desire grows in space. Space allows reflection, emotional processing, and curiosity. When you don't rush to fill every gap, she feels the weight of your absence. And absence, when combined with emotional stability, creates gravity. This doesn't mean withdrawing emotionally or becoming unavailable. It means staying whole without demanding constant closeness. The man who can do this communicates strength without effort. His calm creates tension. His restraint creates intrigue. The paradox is simple. The less you try to secure attraction, the more natural it becomes. Not because of manipulation, but because desire responds to confidence, not need. And confidence is most visible when nothing is being demanded. Emotional stability is not something you fake. It's something you build. And once it's built, it changes how every relationship responds to you. Becoming emotionally unshakable starts with separating your self-worth from external validation. Her replies, attention, or moods cannot be the foundation of how you see yourself. The first step is awareness. Notice when silence triggers anxiety. Don't suppress it, observe it. The moment you can watch your emotional reaction without acting on it, you regain control. Stability begins there. The second step is regulation. You do not react immediately to discomfort. You pause, you breathe, you allow the emotional wave to pass without letting it dictate your behavior. This teaches your nervous system that uncertainty is survivable. The third step is self-investment. A grounded man has structure in his life, purpose, discipline, direction. When your life is full, emotional distance doesn't feel like emptiness. It feels like space. The final step is trust. Not blind trust in her, but trust in yourself. Trust that you can handle outcomes without collapsing. A man who trusts himself becomes calm under pressure, and calm is the rarest, most attractive form of strength. When you handle distance correctly, something subtle but powerful shifts. The tension that once felt uncertain becomes magnetic. She begins to feel safer, not because you chased her, but because you didn't need to. Your consistency allows her nervous system to relax. Her fear softens. Her instinct stops questioning your stability. And when that happens, closeness returns naturally, without pressure or pursuit. She notices that your energy remains the same, that your confidence doesn't fluctuate, that your presence is steady whether she is near or far. This creates trust, and trust deepens attraction far more than reassurance ever could. Instead of wondering where she stands, you find yourself grounded in who you are. The connection becomes balanced, mutual, aligned, not because you forced it, but because you allowed it to develop without fear. This is the point where attraction stops feeling fragile and starts feeling solid. The moment she pulls away is not the moment to panic, it is the moment to look inward. Distance doesn't ask you to chase, it asks you to check your foundation, to notice whether your confidence is rooted in yourself or borrowed from her attention. When silence appears, you are being shown something important, not about her feelings, but about your emotional strength. Do you remain calm, or do you rush to fill the space? Do you trust yourself, or do you seek reassurance? This is the challenge. The next time she becomes quiet, choose composure over control. Choose stability over reaction. Let your actions reflect quiet confidence rather than fear. Real attraction is not built through constant presence. It is built through consistency of character. When you can stand steady in uncertainty, you become the man who doesn't need to be chased, because his presence is already felt. Take a moment to reflect. When distance appears, do you crumble or do you remain grounded? That answer determines everything.